Atlas Geographus, or a complete system of geography, ancient and modern, for Africa. Volume 4, 1712. Some of the Jews who inhabit both sides of the Niger derived themselves from Abraham. Others fled hither from Asia when Vespasian destroyed Jerusalem, or from Judea when it was wasted by the Romans, Persians, Saracens, and Christians. Some were banished from Italy in 1343, from Spain in 1462, from the Low Countries in 1350, from France in 1403, and from England in 1422. These all differ in habit and are divided into several wealthy and numerous tribes. We shall treat the blacks when we come to Guinea, Negro land, and the Cape of Good Hope, where they inhabit. Leo says, there are other kingdoms on the southern frontiers of this country, which are inhabited by a rich, industrious, and just sort of people. Judaism was the religion of the ancient Africans for a long time, and succeeded by Christianity. But Mohammedanism prevailed in the 208th year of the Haggai, when all the Jews, Christians, and professors of the African religion that could be found were put to death. Yet, in process of time, their intestine quarrels made them neglect Muhammad's law and revolt from the Caliph of Baghdad, for which they were severely punished by the Mohammedan caliphs, who caused all their books to be burnt, on suspicion that the knowledge of the arts and sciences prompted them to contemn Muhammad's law. Purchase his pilgrimage of relations of the world and the religions observed in all ages. By Samuel Purchase, 1626. Concerning the religion of the Africans, in ancient times, Leo saith, they worship the fire and the sun, as did the Persians, erecting in honor of each of their fair and sumptuous temples, in which the fire was continually kept burning, as in the temple of Vesta at Rome. The Numidians and Libyans sacrificed to the planets, and some of the Negroes worshipped Gugimo, which signifies the Lord of Heaven. These afterwards, he saith, were of the Jewish religion, and after that of the Christian, till the 268th year of the Haggai, that some Negro kingdoms became Mohammedan, although they remain some Christians to this day. Those which were Jewish, both by the Christians and Mohammedans, were utterly destroyed. West African Countries and Peoples by James Africanus, 1868. But when Mohammedanism overspread North Africa, destroying by fire and sword all those of another religion, the Israelitish descendants, or the inhabitants occupying the central portion of Africa, passed forward seeking shelter to the south and west, a part namely those from the east central crossing the Benue or Joliba branch of the Niger, descended gradually southward and became intermingled with the original inhabitants. Protected from incursions on the north by the Benue River, and quietly settled between the Great Niger and Old Calabar rivers, they remained in peace and grew from one generation to another in idolatry, but still leaving tangible proofs in the form of their religion of the Judaistic origin of the inhabitants. Ancient mythology proved that through its extensive migratory movements took place several thousand years ago, from Asia Minor to Africa. From a little study of the ethnology of the language of Western Africa and the Hebrew tongue, one is involuntarily brought to trace out a similarity in one of them to that of the tribes which from disobedience to the will of God were dispersed, and the greatest number of them possibly went to Africa. I mean the lost tribes of Israel. If the rites and ceremonies of the religion of the tribes bordering on the banks of the river Niger be closely examined and compared with the religion of the Hebrews at the earliest period, Igbo tribe, if the Igbo language with all its corruptions be compared with that of the Hebrews, and if the peculiar disposition of the Hebrew tribes as detailed in Scripture and that of the Igbos be properly investigated, there will be a priori reason for serious inquiry whether the Igbo tribe, which is but a branch of the Gala tribe in the interior, is the offspring of the lost tribes of Israel, driven down from Central Africa and forced to cross the eastern or Benue branch of the Niger by Mohammedan fanaticism. The Destiny of Nations, as indicated in prophecy, by Reverend John Cumming, 1864. There are a multitude of Jews in every variety of condition in the north of Africa, but there are probably more of the Hebrew race far within the interior, about Timbuktu and the Lake Chad, and still further to the south. To the latter, we shall look for traces of their connection with the lost tribes. It is well known that the Ga and other Negro tribes have numerous, well-marked Jewish characters in their religious observances. A paper by Mr. Hanson, a native preacher, read before the British Association of Science at Swansea, 1848, leaves no doubt of the fact. Now, unless we suppose that the Hebrews were derived from the interior of Africa, we must suppose that the Hebrews have penetrated there and thence diffused the elements of civilization. A new accurate description of the coast of Guinea, divided into the Gold, the Slave, and the Ivory Coast, by William Bosman, 1704. When the custom of women is upon the female sex, they are not only esteemed unclean and separated from their husband, but they are not suffered to go into another man's house, at least to lodge, and are consequently obliged to remain in a small hut, near their father's or husband's house. The children are not circumcised anywhere on the Gold Coast but at Accra, but whence the custom of holding women unclean and circumcising of children should be derived from, I own I cannot tell. To carry it up as high as the Judaic times seems to me too far, though several Europeans favor this assertion, urging that the Negroes still retain several laws and customs which favor of Judaism, as last mentioned, the honoring of the moon at the time when the Jews begin their festival, the marrying of their brother's wife, and several more, which seem the same in effect, as well as the names, of which here are several which occur in the Old Testament. Cyclopedia of Missions, containing a comprehensive view of missionary operations throughout the world, by Reverend Harvey Newcomb. Among all the tribes of both Upper and Lower Guinea, there are many unmistakable traces of Judaism. The existence of 12 families in most of the large communities on the coast, the extreme care taken to keep them distinct, the rigid interdiction of marriages between members of the same family, and various other customs show that they have views akin to those of the Israelites. On the Gold Coast, they divide time into weeks, have their lucky and unlucky days, and observe the new moons with as much interest as the Israelites. Circumcision is practiced among all the tribes in Western Africa. The practice of sprinkling the blood of animals, as they invariably do, on the doorposts of their houses and above the places where their fetishes are kept, was seen to indicate a Jewish origin. In the house of the chief priest, there is usually an altar with 2 horns, and criminals fly to it, and they lay hold of these horns as the Jews did of old. And no one can remove them but the chief priest himself. They have their stated ablutions and their purifications. They shave their heads and wear the poorest kinds of clothes as marks of mourning. At the funerals, the women are the chief mourners, and the time of mourning corresponds with that of the Jews. The Lost Tribes, a Myth. The Library of Biblical Studies, edited by Professor Harry Orlinsky. These facts have a peculiar significance when the presence of Judaism among American Negroes is to be considered. Hundreds of thousands of slaves were brought to the Americas from this Western Africa during the days of the traffic, beginning nearly 400 years ago. How much more of Judaism survived amongst the West African Negroes in that earlier time? As persecuted communities, they were rather more in danger than other Negroes of being raided by war parties and sold as slaves. It may be considered certain that many partially Judaized Negroes were among the slaves brought to America.